Hi, friends, and welcome to another episode of your Bish Therapist podcast. I am your host, Melissa Reich, your Bish Therapist, a real-life therapist turned pop culture aficionado, serving clinical interpretations and hot takes on all things pop culture. And today, I am going to be talking about a variety of happenings in the Bravo world. I'm going to be starting out with some breaking news about Tamra Judge, who allegedly, according to her bio this morning, quit Real Housewives of Orange County after yesterday. So I'm recording this on Monday. This will come out on Tuesday. So on Sunday on social media, we saw Tamra, Gretchen, and Shannon filming in NOLA, whatever you want to call it, New Orleans, Louisiana. There were, boots on the ground they caught the ladies filming. And then all of a sudden last night, on Sunday night, Tamra posted a Instagram story that she was done. And then this morning, she's taken Real Housewives of Orange County off of her bio. And I was like, wow. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that because I think we were all surprised. I thought this morning she would wake up and, regret it and, whatever. She said she's leaving like 100 million times before. She never has. But it looks like this may be it. So I'll fill you in on that. I'm going to talk a little bit about Denise Richards. She has this new show. And I think it's like Wild Things. Denise is, I don't know, it's some sort of play on that. And I'm going to talk about her husband, Aaron Phypers, who has done some real shady stuff. And there's been allegations of fraud and all of that. So I'm going to be talking about that today because, as you know, as a 2-time cancer survivor, I just don't play with people who take advantage of marginalized groups, people who have health issues and all of that. And nothing makes me angrier. So I'm going to roast him. Speaking of roasting terrible men, I'm also going to roast James Kennedy, going to talk about a little bit of news there. And then for the rest of the show, I'm going to talk about Southern Charm and if there's time, Atlanta. Now, what I will say is our peaches are back and I am so excited. I have watched Real Housewives of Atlanta since season 1, episode 1, where Kim had her shiny wigs and she was a chain smoker. I've just always loved Atlanta. And so I was wondering how this cast reboot was going to work. And I'm telling you, the first episode was magic. So I am very excited about the season. If I don't get time to talk about it today, I will dedicate an entire episode to it next week. I just wanted to give you guys a couple of updates with myself too. First of all, daylight savings time has revived life into my mental health, which had been really struggling lately. This week, Yabish is in a boot because I may have torn my plantar fascia, because I'm such a high-powered athlete, like a sloth or a turtle. That's literally me. But I have a lot of musculoskeletal issues, and I just was at home and I just stepped and, I've been in a boot and it's been hurting my back and causing fluid in my knees. And so, Yabish has really been on the struggle bus. But daylight savings time has breathed life into me in ways that I just want to remind you all. Spring is coming. The flowers will bloom. The sunlight is here. It will get warm. So anyone else who is on the struggle bus right now, just hold on. We're so close. We're almost there. And I do want to give a quick update that I'm meeting with my oncologist this week. So I am I'm very excited about that because for me, I'm the type of person I don't like to avoid. I just like to know. I just want to know what's going on. So after that, I will keep you all posted as well. Back to Bravo. All right. Last night, social media was taken by storm when Tamra Judge posted a story, and I'm just kind of looking at it on my phone. So she posted a story. It was a long run. When life gives you real problems, this reality shit doesn't make sense. Peace out, little, peace sign. I'm out. And when I was scrolling social media, I follow, like a million Bravo accounts, of course. And there's this Bravo account called Taste of Reality. And they posted, "Is this real?" And Tamra posted in their comments. Yes. And so I caught that and I made a little meme of it. And then Taste of Reality responded to her, Tamra, what's going on? Question mark, question mark. And of course, no explanation. And this morning, if you're listening to this right now, go to Tamra Judge, go to her page, and if you're not blocked, and just check out, it's gone from her bio. Real Housewives of Orange County is gone from her bio. And, Tamra has a history of, being like, you guys will never see me again. I'm leaving, whatever. And so I think it's kind of one of those things that she's like the boy who cried wolf. And so understandably, no one believes her because she said this so many times. However, recently, Teddi took to social media. Teddi Mellencamp, in fact, does have metastatic melanoma, and that is extremely serious. It's extremely scary. I had discussed this a little bit during M&M Hour, but so previously, Teddi had some brain tumors and they found out that they are cancerous. Her melanoma metastasized and went to her brain and some other parts of her body. And that's extremely serious. This is the type of stuff that it's like she could really not survive this. And I just say that not to freak people out, but to let people know that melanoma is one of the most dangerous cancers. Most people do not know that. And when it metastasizes to other parts of your body, it is very serious. And so the only part for me in this is, with Tamra, is some of this her own, stuff, her own grief, her own, she has two teas in a pod with Teddi. They really seem to have this very close relationship. They're not only podcast partners, they're friends. When you love someone and something like this happens, it does throw your world into the upside down. And so I wonder if that's part of what's happening for Tamra, because when you go through tough stuff like this, it really does make a lot of things seem very trivial, which is also, by the way, why I don't hold grudges, because, Tamra was not happy with me and I've shared that and I've shared that, she DM'd me and, blah, 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 all this other stuff. But the reason why I don't hold a grudge is like, I literally don't care. I have bigger fish to fry. I have a chronic cancer. I have, a movement disorder dystonia. I have POTS. I have Ehlers-Danlos. I have too many things to be worried about if Tamra's mad at me, or I don't care. The only people I care how they feel about me, it's me, my husband, my little 3 angels, and, some other friends and family that I love very much. And that's pretty much the extent of it. And so Tamra doesn't really, these Bravo Labs who come into my DMs, I don't care. I have bigger fish to fry. So that's my only thought with Tamra. Does she have bigger fish to fry? TBD on that. And, it's like one of those things with where Karen Huger is not going to be coming back because obviously she's in jail. And I find that it'll be interesting if Tamra doesn't come back to see, what this looks like. Okay, so now let me move on to James Kennedy. I'm going to just touch a little bit on this because I'm declaring right now, Your Best Therapist podcast is done with James Kennedy. Done with James Kennedy, honey. Done. Okay? And I'm going to tell you why. So James Kennedy has always been terrible. Always. He's a lot of things, but he is mostly terrible. And when, James was on Vanderpump Rules and he would talk about being sober, he was never sober. Being, using other substances outside of alcohol when you have a problem with alcohol isn't sobriety. He and Jax must have gone to that same meeting, or Brittany did do a podcast, which I am going to cover that, but it's just been so much going on for me, is that Brittany in her podcast said she counted 30 lies that Jax shared during his interview with Alex Baskin. And so I think everyone's instincts about what was going on with Jax was correct. I read him. I clinically read him last week. So if you're interested in hearing my thoughts about Jack, please check out my last episode. But my point is that these men, they're king babies and they aren't they're not going to change because they don't want to. And so James Kennedy, for me, I'm serious with YBT podcast. We're done with him after I discussed, I've unfollowed him. I just won't give him any more airtime. I just think James is a garbage person. I really do. So James went viral for posting a picture with the Tate brothers, who are notorious, also pieces of human garbage. If you don't know who the Tate brothers are, you can give that a quick Google search, but they stand on the fact that women who are sexually assaulted bring that about themselves. Yeah. So the Tate brothers, they have one brain cell and they're sharing it. And it's got a very dim light as well. And so they don't have two sticks to rub together up there. So that's not surprising to me. But what is surprising is that James Kennedy played himself when he took a picture with the Tate brothers, knowing exactly who they were, and tried to claim, I had no idea who these people were. Please forgive me. I'm so sorry. I take it back, right? If you're going to have balls to lie and don't fold like a house of cards immediately, what a loser. Tristan Tate posted, begged and kissed my ass for 30 minutes straight and called me a hero about James Kennedy. He knew exactly who I was and what content I made. He's just a pussy who can't handle DMs from woke. And then there's a word that had to be blacked out and could not be repeated because, the Tate brothers are vile pieces of garbage. And then they said, fuck this guy. So I think the only thing will ever agree with the Tate brothers on is that fuck James Kennedy. Okay. That's the only thing that we can agree upon. So James knew exactly what he was doing, who he was talking to. He got some DMs from people who were disappointed in him. And he just folded because he has no integrity. He has no character. He has no integrity. There's nothing holding him up. He's just a house of cards. YBT podcast is now done with James Kennedy. Bloop. Bye. Okay, moving on to Aaron Phypers, who is Denise Richard's husband. Her new show premiered to dismal ratings. Dismal. Most people watched it and they said that it was pretty terrible. It was unwatchable, all these other things. And here's the thing. I think Denise is great. I do. I think her girls are lovely. I think she's great. But the problem is her husband. And we've seen, so if Aaron Phypers, you're like, how is he familiar to me? Well, Denise brought him when she was on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills briefly. And he was the guy who would sit at dinner talking about conspiracy theories, talking about, he's that kind of guy who says lemon juice will cure your cancer type of stuff. Just a real terrible guy. I think, again, we're seeing a theme here, right? Terrible men. Yeah, we're seeing that theme. So let me give you a little info about Aaron Phypers. Oh, and the other thing about Aaron is that Denise, she said something and he got angry and he squeezed her hand so hard, she felt like he was going to break it. And he was upset, and that's why he did that. So, again, I know that I'm being a little bit bold here, but I just have no time for these terrible men. I just don't. So, please allow me to read Aaron for Filth. There have been several articles published in People magazine and in Touch Weekly outlining recent lawsuits alleging Phypers committed fraud. And I'm going to tell you exactly what happened here. According to People magazine, an article published 1/8/25, so this is this year, a lawsuit against Phypers was filed on November 13th, 2024, accusing him of violating a verbal agreement regarding treatment at his Malibu Wellness Center. Rupert Perry is suing Phypers on behalf of his late wife, Alina Katsula Bell. I'm going to just call her Alina from now on because that is a mouthful, but it's Alina, KATSIOULA-BEALL, in case for anyone who wants to look this up. So Alina saw Phypers at his center for her cancer in 2023. Alina was diagnosed with sarcoma in 2019 and learned about a, quote, stem cell treatment for her cancer, end quote, that was offered at Phypers' facility. Now, those of you who are asking the appropriate questions, is he a doctor? No, he isn't. Not even close. But I'm going to talk about that too. Alina's husband, Rupert Perry, alleges that Phypers said the treatment, quote, would cure or at least ameliorate Miss BL's condition. And ameliorate is just a fancy word for improve. The article continues, Phypers claimed that the treatment had a 98% success rate, and he was so confident that if it did not work, he would refund Mr. Perry 50% of the money they paid him for the treatment. So this man and wife paid Aaron Phypers $126,000 in return for the stem cell procedures between July and September of 2023, per the release documents. Just months later in December, Perry claims his wife was told her tumors expanded by 25%, so they wrote Phyper to let him know and requested half of the money back, which was $63,000. Phypers ignored her request and instead proposed that she undergo another round of treatment. That sounds like a right response, right? This isn't working, so pay us more money. Perry alleges going on to claim their future requests for the money on February 8th, 2024, March 7th, 2024, and March 29th, 2024 all went ignored. On May 21st, 2024, Alina succumbed to her illness and died. On June 28th, 2024, Mr. Perry spoke with Aaron Phypers by telephone, who acknowledged the debt, but proffered a series of excuses for his failure to pay the $63,000. Perry alleges in the docs that Phypers' aforementioned misconduct was intentional, willful, and done for the purpose of depriving plaintiff of property and or legal rights, otherwise causing injury. This despicable conduct subjected plaintiff to cruel and unjust hardship in conscious disregard of his rights. That's what the lawyer is alleging. An In Touch article published on 2/28/25, so this was just a couple weeks ago, says Perry can't find Phypers to serve him legal papers, claiming that Aaron's business office is closed and empty. So Aaron was the owner of Quantum 360 Club, which had an office on the Pacific Coast Highway. Google lists the business as permanently closed, and the last post on the company's Instagram was in December of 2023, which, by the way, it's still active. Go ahead. If you're on Instagram, go ahead, put in Quantum 360 Club, and you'll see their gross little Instagram page that they're so emboldened that they don't even feel that they need to get rid of. In Touch reported that Aaron was sued in a separate lawsuit over an unpaid $200,000 loan for his business. Denise Richards was recently dragged into the drama after the creditor asked the court for permission to go after Denise's wages for Aaron's debt. Denise has yet to appear in court and no decision has been made. And so if you go and you Google all this, you'll find the stories that I'm talking about. You will find the Google page that says permanently closed. And this story is far from over. Now, people are asking, how is this possible? Because Aaron is not a doctor. Okay. Well, let me tell you, in the field of cancer, there are a bunch of snake oil salesmen who will always promise, I can help you, I can cure your cancer, I can do this. Let me tell you a little story. Okay. When I was 17, I was told I was dying from ovarian cancer, and my parents took me to a Reiki specialist in the town I lived in, which was at the time Hazleton, Pennsylvania. We had just moved from Chicago, the coolest place on earth, to the worst place on earth. And unfortunately, being here when I was sick, I believe is the reason that my body is permanently disabled now. But that's a whole other story. So I see this Reiki doctor. Well, she wasn't a doctor, of course. And listen, I believe in Reiki. Let me be clear, I love Reiki. I love acupuncture. I do it pretty much either every week or every other week, depending on funds. I do chiropractic care. I like yoga, sound baths. Don't misunderstand. I am so open to, I believe that the best treatments for humans are holistic, meaning the best of what Western, Eastern, all sorts of different types of medicine can give you, right? Yes, I'm on immunotherapy. Yes, I'm brought to you by Big Pharma, but I also do a lot of other things to keep my mental health, my emotional health, my spiritual health, right? Really, that's really important. And so all of this has a place. But in all of these very real places are very real snake oil salesmen. and very real people who know what they're doing is wrong and they're trying to make a quick buck from people who are really vulnerable. And of course, as you know, I won't stand for that. I feel like that should put that on a t-shirt. I won't stand for it. So Aaron Phypers is not a doctor. He was what you would call a quote unquote middleman, which I still am very confused about. I don't understand how any of this works in California. I went to this Reiki practitioner who told my parents, don't do chemotherapy, just do this. And, you know, my parents have their issues, but they both looked at that woman and were like, pass. Do your thing, but we're also going to treat her, you psycho. And that's the only reason that I am still here today. And this Reiki person, I'm not going to say her name because she eventually got sued and then eventually passed away. But she did this to other people and who listened to her, and then they died. Because as much as I believe in Reiki or acupuncture or breath work or meditation, cancer is a very formidable force. And so what irritates me about people like Aaron Phypers and all these other assholes with healthy privilege is this. People like Aaron are gifted physically. Like, healthy privilege is a very real thing. Healthy privilege is where you just assume, or people just assume, that they can get COVID, they can get the flu, they can get whatever, and they'll be fine. They'll recover and they'll have no troubles. But the problem with healthy privilege is it's a facade, because you have it until you don't. And when you don't have it, you realize, oh, wow, most people are walking around in this fugue state, just assuming that their life is great, not understanding that cancer is a very formidable force. And I will share with you that I went to high school with a friend who now is a doctor, and her daughter has been dealing with cancer for years. And this is a person who's not only a medical doctor, worked in the emergency room after her daughter was diagnosed with cancer. She became a holistic practitioner as well, credentialed, insured, licensed, all of that stuff. She has her own holistic practice now. And the point is that this child of hers is now in a trial that is the last hope to save her life. And these are people who did everything right. They fed this child all the proper things that you said she should have. Infrared saunas, chemotherapy, bone marrow transplants, the best of all medicine that she could have. They did all the holistic stuff, all the medical stuff, and the fact is that she may not survive. And the reason why I share this is because Aaron Phypers is the type of piece of shit who works on the fears of people, right? Because when I was first diagnosed with CLL, I'm going to tell you a little something. I thought, well, maybe I can eat my way out of this, right? Maybe I can change my diet. Maybe I could become vegan. Maybe I can use essential oils. Maybe I can do all these things, right? And you can't, because cancer doesn't give a shit about any of that. Yes, there are things that can be helpful, and I use those things to my disposal at all times. But to try, anyone who is going to make a claim to a cancer survivor, any doctor worth their salt will let you know that is a red flag. If you're doing any sort of treatment and they're like 95%, rate of this or that, unless you're in a clinical trial and they're looking at actual scientific research, that's snake oil. That's false. Because the fact is that cancer, again, I'll say this 1,000 times, it's a formidable force, and the best of medical technology sometimes cannot affect it. For one person's cancer, immunotherapy and medical technology can work great, and for another person, it doesn't. And so my point is that when people try to tell you, well, just eat vegan or do this or do that, these are people who have no idea, and they're grasping at straws to gain some sort of semblance of control. And you know where that got me? Got me with an eating disorder. And I've never said that publicly, and I've never shared that, but I will share that now, is that I became so entrenched in the belief that I could control my health that I started following all these stupid websites. And I will say Chris Beat Cancer is one of them, that they take advantage of people saying, well, I had stage 1 cancer and I didn't need treatment, and then I changed my diet and I survived. Well, that's very different than people who have a stage 4 cancer or sarcoma, which is a very deadly cancer, or a blood cancer, which they're notoriously very challenging to treat, right? Not all cancers are created equal. And so people like that take advantage of this group of people who like to believe that if you just eat better, you'll be fine. So what ended up happening for me was I became so afraid of food that I developed an eating disorder, and I had no idea. I thankfully was seeing my therapist that I'm seeing now. This was years ago. And she said to me in a session, she said, I think this has become an issue for you. And I just had a total blind spot. I was like, what do you mean? And so I ended up seeing a nutritionist and realizing that I had become so fearful that the food that I put in my body was going to make my cancer worse that I had just stopped eating. And I didn't realize it. I didn't know. I thought it was healthy what I was doing, but it was an eating disorder and it was not okay. I just want to say these people who are taking advantage of vulnerable people who are afraid to die, I just feel that there is a special spot in hell for people like that. Aaron was the middleman for a company, but either way, once they knew about this, they took these people their money and ran. And I think that's just disgusting. And so I'm not going to be watching Denise's show. I encourage other people not to watch the show. I heard also it was absolutely terrible, but I just feel like I can control where I put my energy, right? Where I put my dollars, where I put my emotional energy. And she and her husband, it's not going to be it. He may have a huge penis, but I just can't imagine that he's an actually good person, given what we know about him. And so TBD, we'll see if Denise pays his debts or if they get divorced and she spills all the tea. Who knows? I will keep you posted on that. Okay, and now on to Southern Charm. So we finally see the episode that has been teased for months about Shep and Sienna crashing and burning, breaking through Shep's. What we now know is that Shep had curated this fantasy in his mind that was not shared by Sienna, and it just came to a crashing halt on camera and in front of a crowd of his peers, which is like full yikes. So we watched Sienna tell Shep we weren't in love. We were never in a relationship, which it was so wild to watch Shep's reaction because he was just so in denial. His ego just swooped in to protect him because he just refused to acknowledge her truth. He was like, no, wait, I know what you feel. I know what you said you feel. I know. And she's like, oh, but you don't know. And so emo Shep was not on my bingo card because, we're used to Shep just being like such a king baby and also like an asshole. But this Shep actually made me feel sad. I was not comfortable with a sad emo Shep. He said that losing Sienna felt like a death by 1,000 paper cuts, and he likened them to Ophelia and Hamlet, which I have to say, that was an unintentional golden analogy, and I will tell you why. Hamlet and Ophelia are depicted as lovers, although their relationship was complex and tragic. Hamlet was initially enamored with Ophelia, but later rejects her, causing her mental breakdown and eventual, trigger warning, suicide. This isn't exactly a spoiler alert because Shakespeare is super old, okay? So it's not like I'm telling people something they don't know, but of course, before I say that word, I just want to give a trigger warning. So unintentionally, Shep's analogy was so spot on, but in this case, he's Ophelia and Sienna is Hamlet. And here's the thing, anyone who's read Shakespeare or knows anything about this is that Hamlet's behaviors were notoriously cruel. So honestly, the analogy was so spot on, I just died. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love literature. I love Bravo. This is an amalgamation of all of my loves. And I was like, I'm so glad I'm here to be, letting people know that this analogy that he gave is actually really spot on if the roles are reversed. So the thing of it is that I feel at first I was like, oh, Shep made this up in his mind. It's not her, whatever. But then we see Sienna just doesn't have a lot to say to Shep. And he's now professed his love a couple of times. So it's you can't say that you didn't know that's how he felt. And you're just ignoring him as he's sharing with you how he's feeling. At dinner, Sienna tells Madison that she didn't want to be in the passenger seat of Shep's life. And I was like, well, that's fine. But the problem is maybe you should have told this man this about 4 days ago when they first arrived in the Bahamas where you live because they came there to see you. So stop pretending that you're not a part of this problem because she is, and her behaviors are cruel. And here's the thing. Shep's not my favorite, but don't do that. Maybe I feel like Shep is like a little brother that I'm like, I can pick on him, but don't do that. I don't know. Maybe that's how I feel. But I just feel like Sienna was really cruel and played a role. And I think she embarrassed Shep and she made him look bad, which he had no problem doing all on his own. It's not just her. But I feel like if you're saying this to Madison, you probably could have said this to him 4 days ago when they arrived in the Bahamas. Like, you didn't just realize that you didn't want to be in the passenger seat of Shep's life. Like, so to me, that was very gross. But I feel like it doesn't take a psychological genius to recognize that this isn't about Sienna at all for Shep. Shep, his ego saw this as a challenge. And here's the thing, like, it's clear that Shep has never been heartbroken. And Madison does point to the fact that sometimes we need to learn tough lessons, because for those of us who were heartbroken, like in, junior high or high school or college or whatever it is, it's like you're familiar with this. It feels terrible to be dumped, but Shep is 44. And because he's never opened himself up to people before, he's never been dumped. Because you can't be dumped when you don't put yourself out there, when you're emotionally unavailable and you're, all these other things. And so heartbreak is a universal human experience. It blows, but welcome to it, Shep. This is just part of it. And by the way, I'm going to share this because I think, number one, it's really funny and people will laugh. And also, I don't know. I guess I kind of feel bad for Shep, which I am not comfortable with this, but here we go. So when I was in ninth grade, I was dating, which, when you're in ninth grade and you're dating someone, especially this was, in the 1900s, when, there was no social media, there were landlines, there were answering machines, there were no cell phones. That's how it was. And I came home. My mom and I came home. I forget where we were. And the guy who I was quote unquote dating, which I don't even know that we actually dated, it was so silly and stupid, broke up with me on my answering machine in front of my mother. And the reason that I share that is because, I thought that was the most embarrassing thing, but it turns out what Shep is going through is the most embarrassing thing. So in solidarity for Shep, I shall share my most embarrassing story. And of course, my mom was just like, I'm sorry. And I was like, oh my God, save it. I just ran up in my room and I just died. And I didn't even care about the boy. I didn't even really like him, which was the irony of this is it was I don't even really like you that much, you loser. So just, when you're thinking about cringe moments, please always remember this story and just be easy on yourself. Okay. Continuing. The funny story is that this megalodon tooth hoe necklace had me belly laughing. So here's the thing, though, about these hoe necklaces that Shep gives out. Okay. So Taylor meekly said, it's the same one you got me. And Shep responded, no, yours was a great white, not a megalodon. And I just died because the other thing, a young bish loved, I think I've explained this before, is I loved fossils. Paleontology was so fascinating to me. Dinosaur bones. Literally, this would have been right up my alley. And I'm not joking. That necklace was actually pretty cute, which maybe that just shows how dorky I am. I wouldn't pay $800 for that necklace. I wouldn't pay $1 for it. But it was actually really pretty. But here's the thing. I posted on my stories, for those of you who didn't get to see this, is that Taylor somehow was modeling the necklaces. So Taylor, Shep, and this necklace company, they had some sort of agreement, and Taylor was modeling the necklace that Shep bought or got for Sienna. And I'm just like, okay, so these hoe necklaces really have a story, and I'm like, I need to know more about it. So I'm going to try to look that up, but I'll share it on my Instagram stories, and then I'll share it in my Patreon as well. So go over and check those out. Because also when Taylor was like, well, you gave me one. Well, if she was a model for them, why didn't she say that? I don't know. It just seemed very odd. But I do want to give a special shout out to Taylor, who seemed genuinely mature and respectful in the face of Shep's romantic implosion, because so many humans would have taken Petty Boulevard. They would have taken the Kenya Moore hair care drumline route, but instead she took the higher road. Kudos to Taylor. And let me tell you a little something funny about this funny Bravo reference. I wrote that and I posted it on Instagram before Real Housewives of Atlanta came back. And people were like, oh, I love that reference. I love that that's the baseline for Petty, like the Kenya Moore hair care drumline at Marlo's wig event. This was like years ago. And what's interesting about that little nugget of information is that Kenya Moore is fired from Real Housewives of Atlanta. She's completely edited out. She is not in the cast photos because Kenya Moore couldn't help herself. And in another hair care shady moment, she was like opening her hair care spa. She sourced, printed, and posted sexually explicit pictures of her co-star or cast member, Britt Eady. And so it's wild to me that Kenya's ultimately like shady like line that we all love eventually, like ironically, like was her downfall. How bizarre is that? So please tune in when I talk about Real Housewives of Atlanta, because I have a lot to say about that. Okay. So Shep kept repeating that he was uncomfortable, and the reason is being in denial is the epitome of discomfort. Discomfort is our brain's way of letting us know that there's a problem, and some part of Shep knows that Sienna isn't interested, but his ego swoops in with, he said, we missed it by a little window. And he did this like little, I post video of this, by the way, to my Patreon. And like, I'm doing the little pinch with my hands. And I was just like begging Shep to let this Bahamian mouse go. Please let this Bahamian mouse go. And, in fairness, here's the thing. Shep leaves a lot to be desired, but he's a human being and he is deserving of love, and he is not deserving of someone who's going to play him for a fool. Okay, so Craig has an overly strong reaction to Shep and Sienna, and it's clear that there's something odd about the response. Austen, here's an interesting thing. Austen's on my list, but he really did do a good job there asking a valid question to Craig, which made him think. Austen kind of grabbed Craig by the shoulders and was like, buddy, what's this energy all about? And honestly, when someone has more elevated energy than is appropriate for a situation, that usually indicates that it's about more than the situation. It's usually there's some sort of displacement, projection, there's some sort of inner experience for us going on when we have an elevated energy. And so even though Austen is on my nerves, he does seem to have his fingers on the pulse of like his friends. And Craig initially said, I'm sensitive to justice. And Austen did clap back immediately. And he was like, okay, JT, which I honestly, the saying, sure, Jan. Well, I'm now replacing that with okay, JT, because that Bravo vernacular is just like so spot on. Craig is being harsh, but Austen is not helping Shep by staying silent. So it's like you have Craig over here on one end of the spectrum, Austen over here on the other one, and neither one are healthy scenarios, and I'll tell you why. Craig is so focused on being a good friend and being honest, and he doesn't want to be an enabler, but that logic goes the way of like JT when we start to think that we can say whatever we want in the name of truth, okay? And you can't. It's not what you say, but how you say it. And so when Craig announced loudly at the table that Sienna made Shep miserable and was the cause of his bender, that was not appropriate, productive, accurate, and it was projection. And I'm going to tell you why. So Craig, he has this scene with Austen where, he's crying and he's talking about, he basically says that he's an addict. He says that he was an alcoholic. And for Craig, it's clear that it's really not about Shep or Sienna. It's about his displaced emotions projected onto Shep and Sienna. Displacement is a defense mechanism where the person redirects an emotional reaction to onto another person. So like displacement, for example, the old adage was you go to work, you have a bad day, you come home, you yell at your wife yells at the kids yells at the dog, right? It's displacement when people, and there is a trickle-down effect, by the way, in families. When you have someone at the top who's displacing their emotions, it is a trickle-down effect, and that is what kids learn, unfortunately. And so I thought it was really interesting. Austen calls Craig out for exaggerating And Craig defensively yelled, "I'm a lawyer and a storyteller." I was like, okay, JT. Craig is lying to himself and he's hiding his internal crises from others. Therefore, he's projecting onto Shep because it's easier to call out someone else's stuff than it is to admit our own. So finally, Craig and Austen have this talk about him being an alcoholic while he's holding on to a bottle of champagne and he's clearly intoxicated. But sometimes to say hard things, we need courage. And unfortunately, sometimes substances are that courage. And honestly, it really is spot on because it's like Craig can't admit his truth without alcohol, which, to be honest, does really indicate that it's a problem. So his behaviors are consistent, if I'm being honest. So Craig admits, I don't have a leash on it. That's any addict. He says, I was trying to not be an alcoholic. Craig explains that he was white knuckling it in the trenches alone, crediting Paige with being his only ally. And Craig cried about feeling so lucky. Paige helped him, quote unquote, beat his demon, which made me so sad seeing the mess that's just transpired in the last few weeks, which it's like such a good reminder is that Paige and Craig, no one's a bad person here. It's a sad situation. Fully feel for Craig, knowing how strongly he feels for Paige and being dumped. Like that is really hard. And I wonder if Paige watched that and she felt bad. I don't know. I just feel like these are two human people. The Bravoverse has gone out of control with it. One thing I know for sure is if all of us do need help to heal, okay? And I wanted to use this time to say that men's mental health matters and nobody should suffer alone. So Craig internalized his struggles, which, let me be clear, the best way to be unsuccessful and crash and burn is to internalize. And I say that as someone who is the leader of the internalization committee. Okay, leader, president and CEO, okay, of the internalization committee. I am a professional at dissociation, internalization, compartmentalization, what people who have had more trauma than they've had good things, you're all nodding your head right now. You're like, yes, 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 I get that. And so as someone who admittedly, I have struggled with that, I'm telling you the path to hell is paved with internalization. Because the thing of it is when you're having these really hard feelings, you need to talk to someone who you can trust. But because a lot of people, myself included, for example, it sounds like Craig trusted Paige and that was all. And so then he internalized it. And a lot of men, they feel ashamed. They feel ashamed and embarrassed. And so they keep it in. I don't care who, if you're a human, you got to talk about stuff. Okay? Are you a human? Yes? Yes, you are? Okay, well, then you need to talk about stuff. Because it's just, as human beings, we can't suffer in silence. That just leads to us thinking things like nobody cares. And it's like, well, you're not giving people the chance to care. You're not trusting people enough to say, hey, I'm struggling with this. Can I get help? And the case in point of why this is so important, Austen and Craig were arguing all season. And as soon as Craig cried and admitted to internalizing his struggles and admitted to struggling with alcohol, it led to a tectonic shift in Austen. And the reason why is we can always give grace when we understand the battles occurring behind the scenes. So Craig admitted watching Shep this weekend brought up emotions because he sees his sick past self in current day Shep. And this is what his elevated energy was all about. This right here. And it just goes to show if we understood how much projection underlies human behavior, you would learn to take almost nothing personally, truthfully, because pretty much projection, displacement, all of that, that's pretty much what humans do. So, I just want to say that I hope that Craig and Paige can move on and be happy. I hope that Shep can learn a lesson from this, is that, humans, you've heard me say this before, humans really tend to overcorrect. So Shep was over here in the side of emotionally unavailable person. And then you have him swing over here with Sienna to becoming so emotionally available that it's actually inappropriate. And so when humans overcorrect, it's usually heinously inappropriate. And Shep needs to find a middle ground where he is letting people know his feelings, but only the people who are prepared to hear them and to treat them with kindness. We can't be sharing our feelings with any old Joe Schmo. Trust has to be important there. You have to know that someone has your back. So Shep just has to, these men have to start trusting each other, that they need to start sharing and having each other's backs. Otherwise, they're going to be miserable alcoholics forever. We see them come home from the trip, and Shep shares these toxically positive platitudes, which is the reason why he's in emotional hell. Sometimes all we can do is sit with pain, face it, and the more we run, the uglier it gets. So that's wild. The last thing I want to say before I end here is that, Venita dished that JT made it clear about his feelings for her behind closed doors. And she admitted that he texts her paragraphs and paying her attention. And she said that he was giving his girlfriend crumbs, which I was like, I don't think that really played well for Venita, but that's fine. And then this week on social media, JT's current girlfriend, fired some shots at Venita in the comment section of a Bravo fan page where all the intellectual summits occur, of course. And here's the thing. These two women need to stop fighting long enough to realize they are both being played by this man, because JT claims to be a gentleman, but emotional infidelity is not gentlemanly. Get JT off our screens. Venita, you deserve better. Please get your head out of the clouds with this terrible troll. And, can we start finding some good people in Charleston for these people to be dating? Good people. Anyway. That's going to be it for me today. There was so much to talk about in the Bravo-verse. I will definitely be getting to Real Housewives of Atlanta next week. The first episode was really giving, and I just feel like it's going to be an amazing season because the first episode already gave us so much. I'm just extremely excited for that. So please stay tuned for that. And please go to, if you all would be so kind, please follow Your Bish Therapist podcast and click automatic downloads. That helps my numbers out tremendously. Please, if you could be so kind, give a 5-star review. I really appreciate that. And the last thing that I'll request is for people to just check out my Patreon. You can join for free. There are various tiers between $5 and $15. I post ad-free early release content there. I post just things that I don't want to post on Instagram because social media is kind of a nightmare. So I posted about the Tamra stuff. When I'm privy to things that are happening, I post them immediately there. So please go over to Your Bish Therapist on Patreon, or you can look up Melissa Reich. Please check that out. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you always for your amazing support. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Sending love to you and yours, and ta-ta for now. Disclaimer. Posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Your Bish Therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The podcast, my opinions, and posts are my own and not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Great Heart Productions, or any other television network. The information in YBT podcast and on its social media is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you read, see, hear on YBT podcast or associated social media. Communicating with YBT via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback.